Hey everybody, welcome back to another story. Today I'm going to begin the story of the Battle of the Birds. Okay, long ago in the mists of Scotland, a farmer was walking to market, and he was going there hoping to hire someone to work on the farm with him because he needed some help on his farm. And he was walking down the road, and he was walking past a large hawthorn bush. And who should be sitting up on a branch in that large hawthorn bush but a little tiny Jenny Wren. Now, the Jenny Wren is the smallest bird in Scotland, a little tiny bird about this big. And the Jenny Wren looked down at the farmer and spoke to him as he passed by and asked where he was going. And the farmer said, well, I'm going off to market because that's where I can pick up workers who will come and work on the farm. And the Jenny Wren said, take me, I'll work on your farm for you. And at that the farmer laughed and said, I can't, you're a tiny Jenny Wren, what could you do for me on the farm? And the Jenny Wren said, you'll be surprised which work I can do. Hire me and you will find out. So the farmer thought, well, it's a long trip into town, to the market, to the village, I may as well, yeah, come on. And he took the Jenny Wren and they went back. And the Jenny Wren said, well, what will you have me do first? And the farmer said, well, go out to the stable and you'll see all the corn is out there. Now, corn grows in it's like a long piece of grass, if you like. And on the top are the grains of corn. And the grains of corn have to be taken off. They've been threshed off. And in those days, they would take a big stick and they would bang on the corn with a stick and all the grains would come off. And then they could sweep those grains up and use them to make bread. And the rest of the straw would be used to make a roof or something like that, thatch roofs. And the little wren got to work with his little stick in his beak, and he was threshing the corn. And he was beating away on the corn, and one of the grains came off. And a mouse came out from a hole in the wall, took that grain, and ran off back to its hole with the grain. Well, at that point, the Jenny Wren was a little bit annoyed. So he threshed again, and 2 grains came off. And that same mouse came back out, took the 2 grains, scuttled back off into his hole. Well, the Jenny Wren, he threshed again, and 3 grains came off. And the mouse came out, and the wren said, stop. What are you doing? I'm threshing these grains here for the farmer. You're stealing them. And the mouse said, well, what are you going to do about it? I'm bigger than you. I'm stronger than you. I will take your grains. And the Jenny Wren said, we will meet tomorrow and I will thresh the grains again. And I will not have you coming out here and taking my grains away. And the following day, the Jenny Wren flew into the stable, ready to thresh the grains. And he took with him 20 of his friends, other birds. They all came with him. They were all sitting around watching. And the mouse came out from his hole with his whole tribe of mice, 20 other mice, and they were all looking also at the Jenny Wren. And the Jenny Wren said, but you've brought your whole tribe with you. And the mouse said, look around. You've also brought many other birds with you. And so it was decided that on the following day in the farmer's field, they would have a battle to decide who was strongest and who would have the grain. And the following day, the mice and the birds, they met on the field. But unfortunately, in the time leading up to the battle, word had spread through all the animals and all the creatures. There's going to be the battle of the birds. And all the other creatures came to fight in the battle. And the battle raged on. The animals rushed in and there was a huge battle. Now, round about that time, the king of Tethertown, which was nearby, his son happened to be passing through the area and he'd heard about the Battle of the Birds, and he thought to himself, well, I want to go and witness this battle. I mean, how often do we get to see the Battle of the Birds? And he went there, but by the time he got there, the battle was almost finished. There were only 2 creatures still fighting. It was a snake and a raven. And the snake had wound itself around the raven and was squeezing the raven really, really tight. But the raven had the snake's neck in its beak and was squeezing the snake, and they were locked in a mortal combat together. And the king's son came up with a stick and he beat the snake, and the snake let go and immediately slithered off into the bushes. And the crow flew up onto a branch and looked straight at the king's son and said, "You saved me, and for that you shall receive a reward. Climb onto my back." "Climb on your back? I can't climb on your back. You're just a raven. I'm a grown man." "Touch your hands to my back." And the king's son touched his hands to the back of the raven, and immediately he shrunk down to small size, and he was on the back of the raven, and off they flew. They flew over 9 mountains, through 9 glens, over 9 woodlands, and finally they flew down and down, and they were circling a house. "You see that house down there?" said the raven. "Yes, I see it," said the king's son. "We will fly down." They flew down. He said, "Go in there. That's my sister's house. You will have a good evening. You will have fresh food, wine to drink, a comfortable bed, and in the morning, when you come out, meet me here again." And he did as he was told. King's son went in, and she was really welcoming and fed him, and he had a comfortable bed to sleep in. And the next day he went out, and there was the raven. He touched the raven again, shrunk down. They flew over, this time over 6 mountains, 6 valleys, 6 woodlands. There was another small house. The raven flew around and told the same story about his sister living there, and how the king's son would have a pleasant evening. And he went in, and it was all true. Meat, soup, comfortable bed. And the next day he came out, touched the crow again, the raven, shrunk down, and he flew over 3 mountains, through 3 valleys, and over 3 woodlands. Landed beside another house. And the raven again said, "This is my other sister. You will receive a warm welcome in here. Meet me here again tomorrow." The king's son climbed off, grew back to his normal size as he had the other times. He went in, had a pleasant evening. When he came out, the crow was not there. There was a young man standing there. And the king's son said, "Who are you? Where's the crow?" And he said, "It is I. I was the crow. I was transformed to the form of the crow by an evil druid. But thanks to your kindness and coming with me, the spell has been broken, and I have returned to my human shape." And he was holding in his hand, as he was saying this, what looked like a cloth, and it was folded up and tied together at the top, and there was something inside. And he held it up quite easily in his hands, and he handed it over to the king's son and said, "Take this as a reward. Now, never open it until you are in the spot where you wish to live for the rest of your days. Never open it before that. Don't look inside." And the king's son said, "Okay, all right, I won't look inside." And he took the cloth and he set off for home, carrying the cloth. And he walked and he walked. Now, obviously, they'd flown a long way over the 9 hills and 6 hills and 3 hills and all the valleys and all the woods. He was very far from home. And he was walking and walking and walking. And the cloth was getting heavier and heavier as he was carrying it. You know how you carry something for a long time, it gets really heavy. Anyway, he's carrying it and carrying it. And finally he was walking past a woodland, and he said to himself, "I have to put it down. Put it down." And he was looking around and he thought, "I've got to look inside. I need to see what's inside this cloth. I mean, whatever it is, I can just look and then close it again and then carry it home. I'm going to look." So he leant down and he opened up the cloth. When he opened it, out came an enormous castle. Gardens, orchards like fruit trees, a wall all around the whole thing, a huge castle with turrets and flags flying from the top. an enormous castle just for him. And he was like, whoa, castle, it's awesome. But then he realized, well, it is awesome, but I don't want to live here in this spot. Now, how am I going to put it back into the cloth? The castle was enormous. Just then he hears coming up behind him huge footsteps. He looked round and there was a giant, an enormous giant. And he's looking down at the young man. Why have you built this castle on my land? He asked. And he looked really, really angry. And he was carrying, as all giants do, a huge wooden club. And the king's son looked up and said, I'm really sorry. I had this cloth bag and I looked inside and the whole castle just like sprung out of it. I really don't want to build on your land. And then he had an idea and he said, could you help me? Can you put the castle back into the cloth bag? I can put the castle back in the cloth bag, said the giant, but at a price. Yeah, well, I'm a king's son, so gold? No, I've got loads of gold. Don't need your gold. I want something else. Well, lands? All this land around here, it's already mine. I've got land. Don't need your land. Well, what? Well, seems to me when you go home and you've got this big castle, you're going to marry and have children. When your son, your firstborn son, reaches the age of 7, I will come and you will give your son to me. Do we have a deal? Well, what could he do? He thought to himself, well, the giant's the only one that's going to put this back in the bag for me. And 7 years from now, he'll forget. Yeah, okay, we've got a deal. And the giant very easily put everything back into the bag and handed it to the boy. I'll see you in 7 years, he said, in a rather menacing way. Well, the boy, the king's son, he travelled home to tell the town, and very close to his father's castle, he opened up the bag again, and it came the huge castle with the walls and the orchard, the flags flying from the turrets, and he went over the drawbridge and through the portcullis, and he went inside, and there standing there was the beautiful princess. And she said to him, we're to be married today. And he literally couldn't believe his luck. This was just incredible. And that's what happened. They married. And they were living happily ever after for 7 years. And then, after 7 years, something happened. There was a sound from far away. And the princess, who was now his queen, said, what's that? And at that, the king's son, his face went pale and drawn, and he said, there's something I think I need to tell you. And his eyes looked down at their 7-year-old son. And his wife said, what? And he said, well, that's the sound of a giant coming. A giant? What can he possibly want? Our land? Money? No, it's not the land, it's not money. Well, what then? And at that, both of their eyes settled down on the child. You don't mean, yeah, I made a kind of a, look, I made a promise, but I never thought it would come to this. Well, you can imagine they were in a real problem there. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to tell you the story, what happened next in the Battle of the Birds.